On the day we got our marriage license, Sonia Gray told me that if we ever slept in separate rooms for more than a week, it meant we had silently agreed to divorce. Every time we got into a fight, she would grab her pillow and run to the other room. And every time, I was the one who had to back down, lower my head, and apologize. He used that threat to keep me wrapped around her pinky. For 3 years. It was my 28th birthday. Once again, she missed our date because of the intern at her workplace. When she came home, she extended diamond cufflinks to me. I did not take it. Sonia frowned at me for a while before saying coldly, "You have a birthday every year. He doesn't get a second life. This isn't a game." I came back as fast as I could after taking Chris to the hospital. "Stop throwing a tantrum. How controlling can you be? You're a monster." She went right into the guest room. This time I did not go after her. Sonia slammed the door shut like usual. Of course, she did it on purpose. She wanted me to give in and ask for peace. But this time I stayed seated, quiet as stone. I did not cry or become anxious like I used to. I was tired of living life this way. I did nothing wrong, but every time I was forced to beg for forgiveness, the air conditioning was turned up high, but the ice cream cake on the coffee table was still beginning to melt. Just like this marriage, no matter how much I tried, the cracks never healed. Instead, they grew bigger and more numerous. I scooped up a small dollop of ice cream and put it into my mouth. The sweetness did nothing to wash away the bitterness, flooding my heart. They've been married for 3 years. In the first year, she stayed at her company, helping Chris showman his proposal, while leaving me alone on my birthday. In the second year, she went to the neighboring city with Chris on a work trip. That day had also been my birthday. Now she left me alone, standing in the rain just because Chris called her over. I was staring blankly into space when the guest room door suddenly opened. She approached me, and my heart skipped a beat. A bit of ice cream stuck to the corners of my mouth. Sonia let out a resigned sigh and wiped it off with a tissue. "I'm sorry, honey. I didn't mean what I said. Yes, I know you hate it when I get too close to him. I promise I'll try my best to keep communication with Chris strictly tied to work." All the unfairness and hurt I had kept bottled up suddenly surged to the surface. My eyes reddened. For the first time in 3 years, she was the one taking a step back before I could even voice how happy I was. She continued. "Someone took a picture of me sending Chris to the hospital and sent it to the work chat. Everyone's calling Chris a homewrecker, sick. You shouldn't be dragged into this. I'd like you to clear his name." So much for her taking the first step. So much for feeling moved. She would throw me under the bus again, and again for Chris. And now she had only lowered herself to apologize because of him. For 5 years, I had poured my heart into loving this woman. Now I laughed in her face. She took that as a yes. "You're the best, honey. I'll add you into the group once you clear his name. You can apologize where everyone can see it." So I cut her off. "Don't even think about it." She froze. The tender expression she had a moment ago vanished, placed by exasperation. "We're innocent, Quincy. Why do you keep going after him? This rumor can very well ruin his life. He's just an intern straight out of college." The poor boy was crying his eyes out on the phone. I shot up from my seat and met her eyes. "I'm not interested in Chris's life. Spare me the report, and I'm not going to clear his name either." My fists were clenched, and my emotions were close to spilling over. But I held them in and kept my voice level. Sonia let out a merciless laugh. "Fine. From now on, I'm staying at the company. If you still think you're a man, don't even try to talk to me." The door was slammed shut again. Something invisible squeezed around my heart, and the pain nearly stole my breath. My phone buzzed. I thought it was Sonia. Instead, it was a message from Chris. "Miss Gray took me to the hospital because I had a paper cut." "Don't read too much into that. Only insecure guys are paranoid about everything." I stared at the screen for a few quiet moments, but I did not text back or delete the message. Sonia kicked me out of her car and left me stranded in the downpour. For Chris, I thought he had suffered a near-fatal injury. In the end, it was nothing but a paper cut. When I had appendicitis and the pain had kept me curled up in bed, I had asked her to bring me some water. Back then, she had called me a pampered prince. A bitter smile curled my lips. It was obvious who Sonia truly loved, even if they had never crossed that final line. She didn't come home for the next 3 days, but I did not sit around waiting either. I started packing my things up bit by bit. This house belonged to her even before we were married. Of course, I was the one moving out. On the 4th day of our separation, my friend asked me out for some fun. I used to say no to them since I had to stay home and wait for Sonia. This time, I said yes immediately. For the first time in forever, I finally had an outing. and just my luck, I ran into the two people I least wanted to see. Sonia's eyes lit up for a moment, but then it was replaced by disdain. She frowned. You came all the way here. God, you're an embarrassment. I was about to retort when Chris mocked. Oh, don't be so harsh. He just doesn't want the divorce to go through. There are only 3 days left. After all. Then he turned to me. You're embarrassing us men, bro. If it were me, I'd wait until day 7 before talking to Miss Gray. Their friends played along. Miss Gray has her husband wrapped right around her pinky. Take some notes, people. The praise was stroking Sonia's ego. Well, she spoke to me as if she were granting me mercy. I get it. I'll be home tonight. Leave. You're ruining the vibes. That was not the first time she had said something like that. I used to think nothing of it. But now for some reason I hated that tone. I looked at Sonia's smug expression and said coldly, I couldn't care less, even if you wanted to stay at your company forever. And I'm here for something else. I went around them and kept walking into the... My response surprised them enough to leave. Them frozen. But Chris snapped out of it first and grabbed my wrist. Stop pushing your luck, Chris. She's already going home tonight. I don't want to get the brunt of your fury when she gets angry. You'd love it if we got divorced, Chris. It'd be the perfect opening for you. Cut your crap acting. It's disgusting. I flung Chris's hand away. It was barely a push, but Chris let out a scream dramatic enough to shame a ghost, and stumbled backward. He did not fall to the ground. Instead, he fell straight into Sonia's arms. His eyes reddened, and he put on a wounded pout. I think I should quit my job, Miss Gray. Everyone's calling me a homewrecker behind my back, because Quincy thinks I am. And now he's hitting me. Thank God our colleagues aren't here. But what if she comes after me at work? Sonia's expression darkened like a storm. She held Chris tightly in her arms and glowered at me. Apologize to him, right now, she demanded. I met her eyes without backing down. Not happening. Her lips pressed into a thin straight line. Either you apologize or we're done. I had already checked out of this marriage, but hearing those words straight from her still shook me. For a moment, I did not let it show. Instead, I sneered. Fine by me, my mood had been ruined, and I did not want to bring that energy to my friend's outing. So, I went straight home. That little episode left me thinking I might not get any sleep, but instead I slept soundly. When morning came, I woke up only to see Chris in my house. For a second, I wondered if I had woken from one dream into another. Chris had only a towel wrapped around his waist. The rest of him was bare as he wandered around the house. Sonya was in the kitchen making oatmeal. It was unimaginable even that she never did any chores. The sounds of me walking downstairs drew their attention. Sonya frowned but said nothing. Chris quickly explained, it's not what you think. I drank too much and threw up everywhere. I lost my keys, too. So Miss Gray had no choice but to bring me here. I snickered. No choice. I think she very much loved taking you home. Sonya slammed her ladle back into the cauldron and swiveled around. She stared at me, her voice filled with impatience. Stop while you're ahead, Quincy. What a joke. She had brought another man home. Yet I was the one going too far. The audacity was almost impressive. She thought she could do this only because I held deep love for her. Anyone who loved her even a little less would have left. The moment she came up with that silent divorce threat, I thought love and acceptance would return to me in the same magnitude. But I had forgotten one thing. Bowing to her again and again would only make her think less of me. My silence stretched, and Chris bit his lip. Sorry for this, Miss Gray. I think I should leave. He pretended to move toward the door. Sonya grabbed his hand before he could even turn. But you're barely wearing anything. What if you run into the wrong sort? I'll take you home after breakfast. After your clothes are dried. She turned to me again, her impatience nearly dripping from every word. First thing in the morning, and you're ruining everyone's day. Sometimes I wish I never married you. Silence crashed into the room like a mountain. Not take long for Sonya to realize she had gone too far. Sonya opened her mouth, but I refused to give her time for any explanation. Icily, I said, that makes 2 of us, Sonya. You 2 stay, I'll leave. I went upstairs and came back down 10 minutes later, with my luggage in tow. Sonya's eyes narrowed. Something close to delight flickered in Chris's eyes, but he quickly covered it with an innocent, you don't have to do this, Quincy. She's just my boss, nothing more. I had nowhere to go and nothing to change into. She only took me in out of charity. I would have ignored him, but Chris had pushed his sickening little act too far. So I snapped at him. Arrogant fool. Oh, please. You had more places to go than you could possibly choose from. Empire has enough hotels. For you to stay in a different one for the rest of your life. You could have bought fresh clothes from any random mall, yet here you are half naked in another man's wife's house. Chris froze up. He had no comeback. So, he immediately looked at Sonya like an injured puppy, begging for help. Quincy. I shut her down before she could start. Shut up. I don't want to hear your voice. With that, I left. 3 days passed, then a full week. The promised deadline had arrived. My phone refused to stop buzzing. Our mutual friends barraged my phone with endless texts. You're still mad at her?
Come on. She's a softie.
She's not even mad at you anymore. Just talk nicely, and this will all blow over. Hey, she's reassigned Chris to another department. You should really stop this tantrum. It's the last day. Come on, stop acting tough. You can't find a woman like her anywhere else. If this divorce goes through, someone else is going to swoop in right away. I laughed. She was the one towing the line of infidelity. But these people thought I should be apologizing to her. I texted in the group chat. We're going through the process as we speak. I'm blocking everyone who told me to suck it up.
Bye.
That was no threat. I blocked all our mutual friends immediately and asked an attorney to send the divorce papers to Sonya. After that, I checked out of the room and grabbed a ride to the airport. Sonya was in a meeting, but her mind was somewhere else. She was restless, checking her phone again and again. Still, there was no news from me. She had been waiting for days. After what felt like an eternity, the meeting finally came to an end. The first thing she did after coming out was turning her attention to the reception room, but it was empty. The old me would have begged for reconciliation. In less than 3 days. Now a full week had passed, and I had not made a single move. She wondered if I was really mad this time. She thought it was just a birthday. In her mind, I was overreacting over something that came around every year. Then something hit her, and her eyes narrowed. She had missed my birthday 3 years in a row, and every single time it had been because of Chris. That answered her question. A sliver of guilt crept into her heart. She knew she had gone too far. So he texted me, I'll take you to the beach once I'm done with work. You've always wanted to have a vacation there. The message failed to send. I had blocked her. A frown creased her forehead. She quickly called me, but only a detached automated voice answered. I had blocked her number, too. The air in the office turned a few degrees colder. She was about to ask her assistant to find out which hotel I had been staying at. When the assistant came in first, Miss Gray, a file from Mr. Mallard. Sonia's frown smoothed out, and her mood.
Wait.
And I thought he had grown a spine in the end. He's begging me anyway, but he's an understanding man. I can let this tantrum slide. Get a watch from the jewelry store. And book a reservation at that fancy restaurant on the west side. Tonight. Her words died in her throat. The moment she saw what was inside the file. The heavy silence of the office was broken only by the sharp rustle of paper. Sonia's assistant, a quiet young woman named Lily, stood nervously by the desk, her hands clasped in front of her. She had seen her boss in many moods, cold, calculating, imperious, but she had never seen the color drain from Sonia's face so rapidly. Inside the crisp manila folder was not a list of demands, nor was it a handwritten apology. It was a divorce agreement. Quincy's signature was already written at the bottom in his neat, elegant script. The ink was dry, unwavering, and final. He had waived any claim to her assets, her house, and the wealth she had accumulated during their 3 years of marriage. He wanted nothing. He only wanted out. This is a joke, Sonya muttered, her voice trembling slightly before. She quickly forced her expression back into a mask of cold indifference. She threw the papers onto her mahogany desk. He's doing this to get my attention. He thinks that by playing hardball, I'll crawl back to him. Lily hesitated, biting her lip. Miss Gray? Mr. Mallard's attorney delivered. Those papers personally. He said his client has already left the city and has no intention of returning. He asked that you sign them as soon as possible to avoid a court dispute. Left the city? Sonia's brow furrowed. Where could he go? He doesn't have any family left here, and his friends are all my friends. He has no money of his own. To just up and leave. She grabbed her phone and dialed Quincy's number again. The same automated voice greeted her. The number you have dialed is currently unavailable. A strange, unfamiliar panic began to prickle at the edges of Sonia's mind. For 3 years, Quincy had been the one constant in her life. He was the one who kept the lights on, who had dinner waiting for her no matter how late she worked, and who quietly accepted her temper tantrums. Whenever they fought, she would retreat to the guest room, secure in the knowledge that by morning, or at least by the end of the week, he would be outside her door, begging for her forgiveness. It was a routine. A dynamic she had carefully cultivated to keep him compliant. But looking at the divorce papers, the reality of the situation began to set in. The 1-week deadline had passed, and Quincy hadn't knocked on her door. He had packed his bags and walked away. "Find out where he went," Sonya commanded, her voice dropping to a frigid whisper. "Check the train stations, the airports, the hotels. He's probably hiding out in some cheap motel waiting for me to call. I want to know exactly where he is by the end of the day." "Yes, Miss Gray," Lily said, bowing quickly before scurrying out of the office. Once she was alone, Sonya stared at the divorce papers. The words irreconcilable differences stared back at her. She felt an irritating warmth behind her eyes, but she quickly blinked it away, hardening her heart. "You're throwing a fit over a birthday, Quincy," she thought, her teeth clenching. "I've been working myself to the bone for our future, and you're acting like a spoiled child over a little intern. When you run out of money and realize how cold the world is without me, you'll come back." At 35,000 feet, Quincy Mallard looked out of the airplane window at the sea of clouds below. For the first time in 5 years, the suffocating weight in his chest was gone. He took a sip of his black coffee, enjoying the bitter taste. For years, Sonya had insisted he drink sweet, milky lattes because she liked them, and he had slowly lost his own preferences in his bid to please her. He had lost his hobbies, his friends, and his career. But no more. Quincy's phone was currently in airplane mode, but even if it weren't, it would be blissfully quiet. He had systematically blocked every single person from his old life. The friends who had constantly advised him to suck it up and be a
man were gone.
They had never been his friends. They were Sonya's sycophants, eager to keep her happy by keeping her husband under her thumb. The plane began its descent into Capital City. When the tires touched the tarmac, Quincy felt a profound sense of relief. Capital City was where he had grown up, and it was where his family's business, the Mallard Corporation, was headquartered. 3 years ago, Quincy had had a massive falling out with his father. He had wanted to marry Sonya, a woman from a mid-sized business family who was struggling to make a name for herself. His father had warned him that Sonya was a social climber who only saw people as stepping stones. In his youthful arrogance and infatuation, Quincy had cut ties with his family, refused his inheritance, and legally changed his name's public association to live as an ordinary man, determined to build a life with Sonya on his own merits. He had kept his wealthy background completely hidden from her, wanting to be loved for who he was, not what he owned. What a foolish, naive boy he had been. Stepping out of the arrivals terminal, Quincy spotted a sleek, black limousine
Parked at the curb.
A middle-aged man in a tailored suit was waiting, his eyes scanning the crowd. When the man saw Quincy, his eyes widened, and he quickly walked over, bowing deeply. "Welcome home, young Master Quincy," the man said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's good to see you, Uncle Thomas," Quincy replied with a soft smile.
"Is my
father still angry with me?" Thomas chuckled, taking Quincy's single suitcase. "The chairman has been tracking your flight for the last 12 hours, pretending to read his financial reports upside down. He's missed you terribly. The entire Mallard estate has been prepared for your return." Quincy climbed into the back of the limousine. As the car merged into the bustling traffic of Capital City, he looked at his reflection in the dark window. The tired, defeated man who had begged for scraps of affection in Sonya's house was gone. In his place was the heir to one of the most powerful conglomerates in the country. "Uncle Thomas," Quincy said quietly. "Yes, young master? I want to finalize my divorce as quickly as possible. Please have our family's legal team take over the case. I don't want any delays." Thomas's eyes flashed with a protective coldness. "Consider it done, sir. The Gray family will not be able to drag this out." Back in her sprawling villa, Sonya sat at the dining table.
It was 8 in the evening.
Usually by this time, the house would be filled with the delicious aroma of Quincy's home-cooked meals. He would run to the door, take her coat, and ask her how her day was. Tonight, the house was pitch black and freezing. Sonya hadn't bothered to turn on the heating, and the silence in the living room was deafening. She walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. There were a few containers of leftovers, neatly labeled with dates in Quincy's handwriting. Beside them sat a half-eaten box of ice cream, the very one Quincy had been eating on his birthday. A sudden wave of irritation washed over her. She slammed the refrigerator door shut. The front door clicked open. Chris Shaw stepped inside, holding a paper bag from a local takeout place. He was wearing a fresh set of clothes, though he still looked somewhat delicate, his eyes wide and innocent. "Miss Gray?"
Chris called out softly.
"I brought some dinner. I figured you hadn't eaten yet. I wanted to thank you again for letting me stay here the other day." Sonya looked at him. For some reason, seeing Chris in her house didn't bring her the sense of satisfaction it usually did. When Quincy was here, having Chris around felt like a victory, a way to show Quincy that he wasn't indispensable. But now that Quincy was gone, Chris's presence felt intrusive. "Put it on the table," Sonya said coldly. Chris blinked, momentarily taken aback by her tone, but he quickly put on a bright smile. "I got your favorite, Miss Gray. Spicy seafood noodles. You must be tired from work." Sonya sat down and took a bite of the noodles. They were greasy, overly spicy, and lacked the delicate balance of flavors Quincy always managed to achieve.
She
chewed slowly, suddenly remembering how Quincy would spend hours simmering broth, just to make sure her sensitive stomach wouldn't react to the spices. "Miss Gray," Chris said, leaning in, his voice dripping with faux concern.
have.
"You heard from Quincy? I feel so bad. If it weren't for me, he wouldn't have walked out. I really didn't mean to cause trouble. Maybe I should write him an apology letter?" "No need," Sonya said, pushing the noodles away. She had lost her appetite. "He's just throwing a tantrum. He'll be back when he realizes he has nowhere else to go." "But what if he doesn't?" Chris whispered, a flicker of hope dancing in his
eyes.
"What if he really wants a divorce? You deserve someone who supports you, Miss Gray. Someone who doesn't hold you back or get jealous of your career." Sonya's eyes narrowed. She looked at Chris, really looked at him. For the past year, she had found Chris's vulnerability endearing. He was young, eager to please, and constantly praised her. But looking at him now, standing in her kitchen, she realized how fragile he actually was. He couldn't cook, he didn't know how to run a household, and his performance at work had been mediocre at best. Quincy had managed their entire home, handled their finances, and even quietly reviewed her business proposals, offering invaluable insights that had helped Gray Group secure several major contracts. "Chris," Sonya said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register, "did you really have a paper cut when you made me drive you to the hospital on Quincy's birthday?" Chris froze. The color drained from his face and he stammered, Well, it was bleeding quite a bit and I have a low pain tolerance and I was so scared, Miss Gray." "A paper cut," Sonya repeated, her voice hollow. She remembered Quincy curled up in bed, shivering in pain from appendicitis. While she dismissed him as a pampered prince, she had left him alone in the dark to nurse a grown man's paper cut. "Get out," Sonya said quietly. "Miss Gray?" Chris's voice cracked. "I said, get out of my house. Go back to your dorm." But my keys." "I don't care," Sonya snapped, her eyes flashing with a sudden, violent rage. That terrified Chris. "Find a hotel. Get out of my sight before I have security drag you out." Terrified, Chris grabbed his bag and practically ran out of the villa, slamming the door behind him. Sonya was left alone in the dark, cold living room. She pulled out her phone and checked her messages. Still nothing. The silence of the house seemed to mock her. 2 months passed. In Capital City, Quincy had completely reintegrated into his family's empire. As the newly appointed vice chairman of the Mallard Corporation, his return had sent shockwaves through the business world. He was no longer the quiet, agreeable husband who wore faded aprons. He was a brilliant, sharp-witted strategist who commanded respect in every boardroom he entered. He had cut his hair short, discarded his old, cheap wardrobe for bespoke Italian suits, and regained the sharp, confident edge he had lost during his marriage. "Vice Chairman, here are the monthly reports for our northern subsidiaries," his secretary, a highly competent man named Marcus, said as he placed a tablet on Quincy's desk. "Also, we received a notification from the legal team regarding your divorce. The Gray Group's legal representative has rejected the settlement offer for the 3rd time." Quincy didn't even look up from his paperwork. "On what grounds?" "Miss Sonia Gray refuses to sign unless you meet her in person. She claims there are unresolved financial discrepancies in the division of assets, though our team has verified that you left with absolutely nothing." Quincy let out a soft, amused chuckle. "She's stalling. She still thinks this is a negotiation." "Should we escalate to a formal court hearing?" Marcus asked. "A public trial would be highly unfavorable for Gray Group, especially given their current struggle to secure the new maritime logistics contract. Let's wait, Quincy said, his eyes darkening slightly. The annual Capital City Business Summit is next week. Gray Group has been desperately trying to get an invitation to secure investors. Am I correct? Yes, sir. They have applied 3 times, but their market cap is too low to qualify. Approve their invitation, Quincy said, a cold smile playing on his lips. And make sure Sonia Gray is seated in the VIP section. Let her see exactly what and who she threw away. The Capital City Grand Ballroom was a spectacle of crystal chandeliers, flowing champagne, and the country's most powerful elites. Sonia Gray stood near the entrance, her hand gripping a glass of white wine so tightly her knuckles turned white. She was wearing a stunning emerald gown, but the dark circles under her eyes, barely concealed by heavy makeup, betrayed her exhaustion. Over the past 2 months, her life had slowly unraveled. Without Quincy to manage the household, her health had deteriorated.
She had
Skipped meals, suffered from chronic insomnia, and her temper at work had alienated several key executives. To make matters worse, Chris Shaw had made a massive blunder on a client account, costing the company a multi-million-dollar
partnership.
When Sonia finally fired him, Chris had tried to blackmail her, threatening to release private text messages to the media. It had taken a hefty payoff from the company's reserve funds to silence him. She had realized, too late, that Quincy had been her anchor. He had shielded her from her own worst impulses, and without him, she was drifting into dangerous waters.
Sonya.
I can't believe we actually got into this summit. Sonia turned to see her friend, Sarah, walking over, holding a glass of
champagne.
Sarah was one of the mutual friends Quincy had blocked. It's a miracle, Sarah whispered. Only the top-tier corporations are invited. Here, if we can get a meeting with the representative of the Mallard Corporation, Gray Group's future is secured. I know, Sonia said, her eyes scanning the room. I need to find their vice chairman. I heard he's the one making all the decisions now. Suddenly, the chatter in the ballroom died down. The heavy double doors at the front of the room opened, and a group of high-profile security guards stepped in, clearing a path. Walking in the center of the entourage was a man who commanded the attention of everyone in the room. He was tall, with broad shoulders, clad in a flawless, midnight blue tuxedo. His hair was styled back, revealing a handsome, chiseled face with sharp, piercing
eyes.
His posture was commanding, radiating an aura of absolute power and
wealth.
Sonia's breath hitched in her throat. Her glass of wine slipped from her hand, shattering on the polished marble floor. Sonia, are you okay? Sarah gasped, stepping back to avoid the splashing liquid. Sonia didn't hear her. Her eyes were locked on the man in the tuxedo.
Quincy. It couldn't be.
The man who had spent 3 years cleaning her floors, the man she had ridiculed as a pampered prince, the man she had kicked out of her car in the pouring rain, was walking through the ballroom like a king. Wait, is that Quincy? Sarah whispered, her jaw dropping.
No, that's
impossible. Quincy is a nobody. He doesn't even have a proper job. But as they watched, the elders of the city's most prestigious families, men who wouldn't even deign to look at Sonia, hurried forward to greet Quincy, bowing and shaking his hand with utmost respect. Welcome back, Vice Chairman Mallard, one of the city's wealthiest real estate moguls said warmly. We've been waiting for your return. Quincy smiled, a polite, distant expression on his face. Thank you, Mr. Vance. It's good to be back. Sonia felt as if the room were spinning. Mallard. The Mallard Corporation. The multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that ruled the northern economy. Quincy wasn't a penniless nobody. He was the sole heir to the Mallard Empire. All the pieces of the puzzle suddenly fell into place. Quincy's refined manners, his deep understanding of high-level business strategy, his complete lack of concern for her money when he signed the divorce papers. He had never needed her. He had given up a throne just to be with her, and she had treated him like doormat. Quincy, Sonia whispered, taking a step forward. As if hearing her voice, Quincy's gaze swept across the room. For a brief second, his eyes landed on her. There was no anger in his eyes. There was no hatred, no longing, and no regret. There was only a chilling, absolute indifference. It was the look one gave to a stranger passing by on the street. He looked away, continuing his conversation with the real estate mogul, completely ignoring her existence. Sonia spent the rest of the evening trying to get close to Quincy, but he was constantly surrounded by a wall of security and high-ranking executives.
Every
Time she tried to approach, she was politely but firmly guided away by his security team. By midnight, the guests began to disperse. Sonia waited in the VIP parking garage, her body shivering in the cold night
air.
She knew Quincy's limousine would have to leave from here. After what felt like an eternity, the private elevator doors opened, and Quincy walked out, flanked by Uncle Thomas and Marcus. "Quincy," Sonia called out, running forward. The security guards immediately stepped in front of her, their expressions grim. "Let her through." Quincy's voice rang out, cold and clear. The guards stepped aside. Sonia stopped a few feet away from Quincy, her breathing ragged. Up close, the physical transformation was even more striking. The gentle, submissive husband was entirely gone. Standing before her was a powerful, intimidating stranger. "Quincy, why didn't you tell me?" Sonia's voice cracked, tears finally spilling over her lashes. "Why did you hide who you were?" Quincy looked at her, his hands casually slipped into his trouser pockets. "Would it have mattered, Sonia? If I had told you I was a mallard, would you have treated me with respect? Or would you have just used my family's name to boost your own company while still treating me like a dog behind closed doors?" Sonia flinched, the truth of his words cutting deep. "I loved you," Quincy said quietly, his voice devoid of emotion. "I left my family, my wealth, and my status because I wanted a simple life with a woman I
Cherished.
I thought that if I gave you everything, if I humbled myself and took care of you, you would eventually love me back. But you didn't want a husband, Sonia. You wanted a servant who would accept your emotional abuse and validate your ego." "That's not true," Sonia sobbed, taking a step closer. I was just stressed. Chris was just an intern. I never crossed the line with him, I swear. I fired him, Quincy.
He's gone.
Please, just come home. Let's start over." "Come home." Quincy laughed, a short, humorless sound. "To a house that isn't.
Mine?
To a marriage that was nothing but a prison? Sonia, you used a silent divorce threat to keep me wrapped around your finger for 3 years. You told me that if we slept in separate rooms for more than a week, we were divorced." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "It's been over 2 months, Sonia. By your own rule, we've been divorced for a long time." "I was wrong," Sonia cried, grabbing his sleeve. "I didn't mean it. I was just trying to keep you from leaving me." Quincy gently but firmly pried her fingers off his suit. He pulled a clean linen handkerchief from his pocket, wiped his sleeve where she had touched it, and let the handkerchief drop to the dirty garage floor. "Sign the papers, Sonia," Quincy said coldly. "If you don't, my legal team will file for a contested divorce. By the time they are done, Gray Group's reputation will be dragged through the mud, and your stock price will plummet to zero. Don't force me to ruin you. Quincy, please." "Thomas, let's go," Quincy said, turning his back on her.
No.
"Quincy," Sonia screamed, trying to run after him, but Marcus and the security guards blocked her path. She watched, devastated, as the sleek limousine drove away, leaving her alone in the cold, empty garage. The fall of Gray Group was swift and merciless. When news leaked that the Mallard Corporation had officially blacklisted Gray Group from all future bids and partnerships, investors panicked. The company's stock began to nosebleed, dropping 20% in a single day. Sonia's board of directors was in a frenzy. They demanded her resignation, blaming her personal life and her public scandal with Chris Shaw for the company's ruin. In a desperate bid to save her company, Sonia tried to contact Quincy's father, the chairman of the Mallard Corporation, begging for a meeting. She was granted a 5-minute phone call. "Mr. Mallard," Sonia pleaded into the receiver. "Please, I know I made mistakes with Quincy, but Gray Group employs hundreds of people. Don't destroy us because of a personal grudge." A deep, powerful voice answered from the other end. "Grudge? Miss Gray, you mistake your own importance. My son gave up his name and his wealth to be with you, and you treated him like trash. A Mallard does not beg, and we certainly do not allow our heirs to be humiliated by a third-rate business family." "I loved him," Sonia cried. "If you loved him, you wouldn't have left him stranded in the rain while you tended to another man's paper cut," the chairman said, his voice dripping with
Pure disdain.
"If you loved him, you wouldn't have let your friends mock him. You didn't love my son, Miss Gray. You loved the convenience of having a brilliant man sacrifice his life for your comfort. The call is over. The line went dead. 2 weeks later, facing absolute bankruptcy and the threat of a high-profile, humiliating lawsuit that would expose her emotional abuse and Chris Shaw's extortion to the public, Sonia finally signed the divorce papers. She sat in her empty office, her hands shaking as she handed the signed document to Uncle Thomas, who had come to collect it. Is he happy?" Sonia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Thomas took the papers, checking the signature with a practiced eye. He looked down at Sonia, his expression neutral. "Young Master Quincy has never been happier, Miss Gray. He is currently in the south of France, overseeing our new resort development. He has found his passion. Again." Thomas paused before adding one final, devastating blow. "And he has met someone. A woman who respects him, who listens to him, and who would never dream of leaving him behind on his birthday. Goodbye, Miss Gray." The Mediterranean sun warmed Quincy's face as he stood on the balcony of a luxury villa in Nice. The air was sweet with the scent of lavender and sea salt. Behind him, the glass doors opened, and a beautiful woman with a warm, genuine smile walked out, carrying 2 cups of espresso. "Here's your coffee, Quincy," she said, handing him a cup. "No milk, no sugar, just the way you like it." Quincy smiled, taking the cup and wrapping his arm around her waist, pulling her
Close.
"Thank you, Elena." Elena leaned her head against his shoulder, looking out at the glittering blue water. "Your attorney called. The papers are signed. It's officially over." Quincy took a slow sip of his coffee. The bitterness was rich and satisfying, followed by a clean, smooth finish. For 3 years, he had lived in a cold, dark room, desperately trying to keep a dying flame alive. He had lost himself in the process, forgetting his own worth and his own strength. But the winter was finally over. He pulled Elena closer, feeling the steady, warm beat of her heart against his
Chest.
He didn't look back. He had a lifetime of summers ahead of him,